everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's me, Kaylee, and today I'm going to be doing a book review video. So I'm going to be doing a book review on People Kill People by Ellen Hopkins. So I do have a few notes in my notebook of things that I want to make sure that I cover, so I occasionally will probably glance at my notebook just to make sure that I'm covering everything and that I'm giving you all the correct information on this amazing book. I highly, highly recommend reading this book. I'm just going to start off saying that. It's a great book. I love Ellen Hopkins so much. Her writing is phenomenal. She tells such great stories. She tells a lot of dark stories, but in a very good way. They're very intriguing. I read this book in probably like 2 days, to be honest with you. So this book was released in 2018, so it is relatively new. It's not like brand new, but it's relatively new, about 2 years old. The writing style of the book, so Ellen Hopkins typically writes in verse, so in like poem form, but in this book she combines verse and prose in this book. So you have sections in the book where she writes in verse, so in poems. And then you also have sections of the book, let me find some, where she writes in prose, so in paragraph form. So mainly the poems are kind of to break up the sections of the characters. When you're reading the paragraphs, they're as the characters' voice and their thoughts and how they see everything. So the poems kind of break up between the 6 different characters that are talked about throughout the book. So this book is a fiction. It is not true, but I mean, it could very well happen. Like, these events have happened, but the characters and their particular stories are all works of fiction. They're not true. It's a very quick read. So like I said, for me, it took me about 2 to 3 days to read this book. It might take people longer than that, but for me, it was a very quick read. I think it's a pretty easy read. It is, let's see, it is 428 pages long. That seems like a lot, but it's an easy read. Like, it's nothing very deep that you have to really think about the text or anything like that. It's an easy read, a quick read. It's very, it pulls you in very quickly, so it's hard to put down, and I think that's what makes it an easy read and short read, because I just couldn't put this book down, in all honesty. But it might take some people longer because it is a 400+ page book. It is a long book. So to give kind of a short summary of the book, I don't want to go into too much detail because I don't want to give anything away, especially if you're someone who is thinking about reading the book. I don't want to give any spoilers, but basically it is about, the main characters are 6 teens, and they're all kind of interlocked. There are 2 other like kind of main characters, but you don't really see their thoughts. There's another teenager and there's a child that 2 of the teenagers had together. And pretty much you follow the story. There's signs in each of them that they could potentially fire a gun and kill someone. Ultimately, at the end of the book, someone dies and someone shoots the gun. That's not really a spoiler because that's kind of in the description of the book. So yeah, so someone dies, someone pulls the trigger, and you, throughout the story, you're kind of sitting there trying to think of who is going to kill who, like who's going to die, who's going to pull the gun. I personally, halfway through the book, I had a prediction of who was going to die, and I was correct in that prediction. I'm not going to tell you who it is, obviously, but I was correct in the prediction of who was going to die. But I was totally, completely, 110% off base with who was going to shoot. That took me for a spin. Like, I was not expecting that whatsoever. I think it was a great way to highlight what is wrong with gun violence and why laws need to be in place, especially in the US. But it really did take me by surprise. I was not expecting how this book was going to end. I am going to take a minute to read the back part of the book that kind of gives you like a little clip up to what the book is about. So it's, a gun is sold in the classifieds, bought by a teenager for protection. 1 week will bring 6 teens in Tucson, Arizona into close contact in a town wrought with political and personal tensions. One person will shoot, someone will die. So like I said, one person dies, one person shoots the gun. But yeah, it's a really good read. So if there's any trigger warnings, there are some trigger warnings. There is gun violence, there is other types of physical violence, there is talks about white supremacy, there is protests that happen in this book, there are home and family issues that are discussed in this book, there's jealousy issues, there's a lot of racial issues discussed in this book. I think they're done in a respectful manner, but if you do have past trauma related to violence, whether it's gun violence or other types of violence, if you have past trauma related to home issues, if you have trauma related to violence being broken out at peaceful protests, especially with what's going on in America right now, if you have any trauma relating to that, this might not be the book for you. You kind of have to go with that at your own discretion. But yeah, that's my trigger warning for this book, is read it, but be cautious about it. If something in here kind of really triggers you, this might not be a book that you should continue reading, and you should reach out to a professional to kind of help you through that trauma. Yeah. So I give this book a rating of 9 out of 10. I think it's a really good book. I think there maybe could have been a little more to it, but I think for what it is a really, really good book. So do I recommend this? Yes, I do recommend this book, but only if you are, so the book says that it's recommended for ages 14 and up. I personally, I agree with that rating. I think I would maybe let a 13-year-old read it, but I wouldn't let anyone younger than 13 read this book. It has a lot of mature scenes in the book, and while we need to teach our kids young about gun violence and racial issues and like teach them anti-racist views to make sure that they grow up to be tolerant and inclusive human beings and good human beings, you need to teach them at an age-appropriate level, and I don't think this is an age-appropriate book for someone under the age of 13. And whoever rated this book doesn't think it's an age-appropriate book for someone under the age of 14. Also, make sure that if you do have trauma relating to any of the topics that are discussed in this book, you read it with caution, because this might not be the right book for you. But it's really up to your discretion at that point. So, were there any questions that I had after reading this book? There were a few questions that I was left with after reading this book, and I kind of hope that Ellen Hopkins does a follow-up book to this. She does often do books in series. She does have some standalone books, but a lot of her books have like a second or a third book going along to them, and I kind of hope she does that with this book. So some of the questions that I was left after reading this book were, I wanted to kind of know more info on what happened legally after the shooting. So she gives like a little bit on what happens after the shooting happens, but she doesn't go into much detail as to what happened to the shooter right after it happened. Like, you hear about the shooter later on, kind of, but you don't hear about any legal things that happen, any investigations, anything like that at all. And I kind of would be intrigued, because of who the shooter ended up being, I would be intrigued to see how that process kind of unfolded. So that was a question that I was left with after finishing this book. Another question that I had was, did the shooting change all of the teens? So, as I had mentioned, there is discussion about white supremacy in this book. I believe 2 of the main characters are white supremacists, and I kind of wonder if the shooting opened their eyes at all, and kind of maybe shifted their beliefs at all. I also wonder how the shooting kind of changed the lives of some of the other teens. Some of the teens were like, we need guns for our protection, and like very strong on that belief. And then one of their friends ultimately dies. So I kind of wonder if their beliefs shifted after that, and if they now believe in more gun laws and regulations. So I'd be interested to see kind of how the characters' thought processes may have changed after the shooting, and also, like I said, I kind of want to know what legally happened to the shooter after the shooting took place. But yeah, that's my main like review on this book. It was amazing. I really recommend it. Again, just make sure you do heed the trigger warnings on this book, because there are some dark and some really serious topics discussed within this book regarding race and racism and gun violence and other violence. So definitely make sure that this, like, you are mentally capable of handling the themes and the discussions in this book. But I do highly recommend it. I think it's a really important read. I think it sheds a lot of light on why we need gun control and some gun laws in this country. You may be watching this video and disagree with me, but I do personally believe that there should be some regulations surrounding guns. I am not a person who thinks that all guns should be taken away, but I believe that there should be regulations regarding who can and who cannot own a gun in America and how you get said gun. I think it's a little too easy to purchase a firearm in this country. Anyways, that's my own personal beliefs. But yeah, I definitely recommend giving this book a read. And even if you don't feel like you could handle reading this book, I definitely recommend reading some of Ellen Hopkins' other books. I think they're amazing. This is, I believe, her newest book that she had come out with, but if you would like me to review any of her other books, I own every single book she's written, pretty much. So if you want me to review any of her other books, let me know in the comments below, and I will definitely do a review on them. She is coming out with a book, Closer to Nowhere, in October that I will be purchasing and will be reading, and I will do a review of that book on my channel. And yeah, I plan to do another review for the book Maleficent. I also read that book recently, so look out for that video, and look out for my other videos and my other Disney content and my other book content. And yeah, make sure to hit the subscribe and hit the little bell so that you get a notification when I post new videos. Bye guys!